Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Sometimes a not-so-good deed can be good for your neighbors. More in the first story. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Unintentional revenge on a county cop. I live on a paved one-lane road less than a mile long with about a half-dozen houses. It connects two other regular roads at each end, and there you can make a complete loop around that's about 2 miles long. For the last several months, a pothole about 200 yards past my house has been growing steadily, and it's gotten big enough to plant a tree in. It's probably 3 feet long, well over a foot wide, and it drops straight down on all edges to about 10 inches deep. Several of us have called county maintenance, but it's low priority. Anybody who's aware of it drives off the shoulder a little to avoid it. When it rains, it fills up and looks like just an innocent mud puddle. One of my neighbors around the corner, Dave, is a motorhead and has his own shop and makes a living fixing cars, trucks, lawnmowers, motorcycles, anything with a motor on it. He likes making hot rods and drives like a professional. He doesn't drink at all, but man oh man, he likes to drive fast, and he's quite capable behind the wheel. Dave trades all the time too, and a few weeks ago he got a speedball motorcycle, some kind of crotch rocket that'll go 100 before he gets out of his driveway. It's a pleasure to watch somebody drive who knows how. One drizzly night last week about midnight, I was letting the cat in when I heard Dave coming down the other road. I stayed outside to watch him zip by. I don't think I'd ever seen him go that fast past here. Then I saw it. A car was about 15 seconds behind him. Couldn't tell if it was a cop car because they didn't have their red and blues on, just the window spotlight and high beams, trying to keep up with Dave. There's no way to keep up with a bike like that on a small side road. Well, Dave made it past the pothole just fine because he knew about it. But that county cop works out of an office in another town 20 miles away. He was trying to keep up with Dave and using GPS for location. I watched his headlights as he hit that pothole doing at least 70. Bam! It sounded like a dump truck turning over when he hit that hole. By the time the cop passed my house, his tire was flat and half his front end parts were rattling around. He'd splashed muddy water all over his windshield and was using his wipers to clean it. He continued pursuit, but by now Dave had gone on past his own house and was nowhere within sight or sound. I learned later that he'd parked the bike behind a friend's house and got a ride home. The cop went on past my house and tried to make the turn where our road has a stop sign and tees into the other. The car had lost steering, and in the security lights everybody has around here, I saw that the vehicle was unable to negotiate the turn. His car ran straight into a cement pole across the road, then slid down a short embankment. It came to rest against a tree. Dave was long gone. I came outside every now and then to watch as a tow truck was called. They had to pull the cop car out of the low spot, put it on a tow truck, and they finally got it out of there about 3 a.m. The next day, that very morning, the road crew was out there and fixed that pothole. Dave sold the bike a couple days later. I imagine Dave did this on purpose. Everyone on the block should pitch in to buy Dave a case of beer. And our second story. HR didn't want to have an awkward conversation. The company I worked for had a quite old-fashioned attitude to the workplace. The workforce was divided into boiler suits and suits or workshops and office. They regarded office as educated, professional, and honest, and workshop as stupid, half-assed, and petty thieves. This was not a view I agreed with. I'd come from a company where everyone from janitor to general manager was treated the same and could have input. If something went wrong in design or manufacturing, it was often a guy working the machine or fitted the parts who spotted it and came up with the correction. In my new place, the office would not accept input from workshop unless they really had to. Workshop had to clock and account for every minute, whereas office were on the honor system. We were trusted to input our own hours, and we usually just entered our 8 hours per day, despite usually working more, sometimes a lot more because we were professional in our work ethic. In my old place, everyone clocked. It was no big deal, but suggesting that it had to happen here was like suggesting that office workers were untrustworthy. Then there was Bob. Bob turned up at about 8:30 and left at about 3:30 and somehow still managed to log 8 hours per day. We had a half-hour lunch break. We could extend it, but had to log it and work the time back. He took long lunches of about an hour or so. He was also a heavy smoker, and about 3 to 4 times an hour, Bob would pop outside for a smoke. Everyone knew about Bob, including HR. We knew that Bob was on a shaky peg for a while because his working hours were getting shorter and shorter while still being charged at 8 hours. Something had to give. HR had an easy job. Have a word with Bob and get him to work the hours he claimed, put him on the RA, remedial action plan, or else fire him for his misaccounting hours. Instead, HR decided to instigate a new policy that everyone on site would clock and would have to account for their hours on site. At no point did HR actually talk to anyone in the office. They just seemed to come up with this plan based on what they think went on. Engineering were generally happy with this, although a few did grumble about honor and trust. HR just shrugged their shoulders and shifted the blame onto the European Working Time Directive and said that it was the new normal. Nothing we can do. Honest. You don't bullcrap engineers because we like rules. And sure enough, some of the engineering team researched it and found out that HR were just using EU law to railroad through a new process. We did need to record worked hours, but nowhere did it say we had to use an electronic clocking system to do it. The old system fulfilled the requirement of the law just fine. The new clocking machines were fitted in every entrance to the office block. We were all given swipe cards and trained on using the new system. We could have pointed it out to HR, and indeed some people tried, but the decision had already been made and they pushed ahead with it. We all knew what was coming, and we continued on as normal, waiting for the end of the month. At the end of the month, the project billing controllers went nuts. While 1 or 2 people were genuinely stealing time from the company, the rest of us were under-accounting for our time. Engineering were on flexible working day. As long as we did core stuff and did our 8 hours, then we were okay. Anything over 8 hours was banked, and at the end of the month was either paid as overtime or flexi-time. I nominally started at 7 a.m., but was usually in by 6:40. We worked to the job so I could leave at 3:30, but it was often closer to 4. Most of us were the same, but we usually just rounded to an 8-hour day. Suddenly, the projects lost 3 to 4 hours of free overtime per person per week with an office of around 300 people. That is a hitload of time, and that has to be paid as OT or banked as flexi as per our contract. 1 or 2 managers suggested that we just adjust our time to the previous hours, but falsifying clocking hours was gross misconduct and a sackable offense. So they went back in their box pretty quickly. HR told us to log our time accurately, so we did. HR refused to back down because EU law, which we knew this was rubbish, so the productivity figures went down, in some cases by over 10%. Costs went up as we had to be credited with all the extra time, so we got at least a flexi day per month that we never had before. Thanks, HR. All you needed to do was have a word with Smokey Bob and his like, and all would be well. But because you wanted to avoid an awkward conversation, we all get extra holidays. Woohoo! Sounds like top to bottom a company that's in chaos. Value your own labor, my friend. Never give your time away for free. And our last story. Don't pay me? You'll lose your shop and get a hefty fine. So this happened a few months ago, around November 2018. I was working at a small cafe as a kitchen porter, basically washed dishes and helped out every so often in the kitchen. Anyway, I was supposed to be paid a week in hand, week after I get paid. As an 18-year-old in college, I was more than happy getting about 50 pounds a week for a few hours of honestly easy work. One week I didn't get paid and asked my boss what was happening. He just told me to bear with him as he had to do something quickly. I complied and he asked me to cut up some chicken and veg whilst he had to quickly pop out. I go into the kitchen, open the fridge that was supposed to be for chicken only, and saw that it had a tray of just raw chicken sitting in blood with veg. Although I wasn't involved in catering as much as I was a few years ago, I still knew this was disgusting and a clear breach of food safety. I quickly snap a picture of everything that was just absolutely disgusting and against health and safety regulations and took as many photos as I could. Somehow, some of the photos got corrupted, so I only had 2 of them. Fast forward to the next week and asked my boss again when I was getting paid. This was getting close to Christmas, so I kind of needed the money for presents. He also owed me about 160 pounds at this point, as I did some overtime. He told me that if I came to see him on the Saturday coming up, it was a Thursday, then he'll be able to pay me. I messaged him on Saturday asking where he was, and he just replied with, "Be there in 5." 30 minutes pass, and he finally shows up and just gives me 50 pounds in cash and basically started to walk off. I asked him about the other 100 pounds, and basically he just said that the shop was being closed for some electrical rework and that he'd be able to pay me then. Now my mom walks past this cafe on her way back from work and taking my sister to hockey training, and every time she did, she saw the place open with a few people, not customers, just chilling. She tells me, and I'm annoyed, so I plot. My mate just suggested, jokingly, to put a brick through the window and then ask for money or just report him to both environmental health and the tax man, as he was paying me cash in hand with no wage slip. Basically, he was paying me illegally and tax-free. I couldn't go to the tax man as I'd be effing myself over too, but I like the idea of environmental health, still had those pics. I make a report and receive a response basically saying how they'd look into it and they were grateful, as this was actually the second store he owned that had been reported. The first one was closed, but not told why. A week or so passes and basically the shop's never opened, and my mate looked into the charges that he knew he'd get all along with any others that he may get. Needless to say, it's most likely more than 100 quid. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.